Hello, good evening. Thank you.
I'm gonna call a meeting of the select board and board. We have a quorum here tonight, so we're officially opening our meeting.
Yep. So it is 6 o'clock. We'll begin. Thank you everyone for coming on a rather cold evening. I'm Joe Yu. I'm the project manager working from the Mass DOT Highway Division headquarters in Boston. We'll be presenting the Bourne Rail Trail, in particular the Phase 2 portion. And before we begin tonight, I'd like to go over some public meeting notes and procedures. Please note that there is a stenographer from Advanced Court Reporting. They have been retained by Mass DOT to provide an official verbatim transcript of tonight's meeting. Mass DOT may choose to retain and distribute the transcript developed from this public meeting. Another important note is that this meeting will be open to questions and discussions at the end of the formal presentation, so please keep your questions and comments to the end. There will also be a pre-recorded presentation of this slide deck that will be available at the Mass DOT Highway Events page. So if you want more information, please visit this website and you'll get all the information that you need after this meeting. All questions and comments are welcome and appreciated. However, we request that you refrain from any disrespectful comments. Moving on this slide, you'll see the notice of Mass DOT's policy on diversity and civil rights. All Mass DOT activities, including public meetings like this one, are free of discrimination. Mass DOT does comply with all federal and state civil rights requirements, preventing discrimination based on sex, color, ancestry, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or veteran status. So we welcome the diversity from across our entire service area. If you have any questions or concerns, please visit the website shown on the screen to reach the Office of Diversity and Civil Rights. So with that, thank you officially for joining this meeting. We appreciate your participation. So tonight's participants for this presentation includes myself, Joe Yu, and with me we have John Bouchard. He is the Deputy Chief Engineer of Project Development. To my left, to your right, is VHB Design Consultants, Project Manager Patricia Domigan, and Project Engineer Marissa Gonzalez. And also in attendance is the Town of Bourne Town Administrator Marlene McCollum, and from the engineering department, Tim Wyden.
And we have members of the select board.
Yes, and we have members of the select board.
Yeah, I'm John Bouchard, I'm Deputy Chief Engineer for Project Development at MassDOT. We have a bit of a formal process that we want to follow, and we do have a stenographer here, as Joe already mentioned, to take a verbatim transcript so we can get some feedback from everyone who's here. But I want to make it a little bit formal as we do the presentation of our slides, but then we're looking for feedback and open discussion with everyone here. I'm sorry that we're so crowded, but we've added as many chairs as we have left in the building, so we'll be a little bit formal, but then we'll have open session for Q&A and looking for everyone who's here to give us your feedback. Okay. On our project goals, we're going to talk a little bit about the overall project goals, the 4 phases that are depicted in our graphic here, which is, not great and legible, and I'm sure everyone in this room knows this better than the graphics that are on the screen. And we're going to introduce the design consultant, VHB, who's working in parallel. They've been working for the town for a number of years on the project. I'm going to get into that in a moment, but also for this phase, this alternative analysis that we've asked them to do. They were the most knowledgeable design firm that had been working closely with the town, so MassDOT engaged them to do a feasibility study for the section of Phase 2. Can you hit that next slide, Joe? So our project goals, as part of our statewide bike plan, we want to establish and implement a region-wide trail network for all users. And so the goals on this project for all 4 phases were to connect the canal path to the Falmouth Shining Sea Bikeway. It was identified in the Vision 88 plan by the Cape Cod Commission, and as I stated, under MassDOT statewide transportation plan, which is shown on the right side of the screen. Our goals here tonight to evaluate alternatives that can be implemented. Couple things I wanted to state at the outset. The town of Bourne has been a great partner with MassDOT on all phases of the Bourne Rail Trail project. The town hired the designer, VHB, for phases 1, 2, and also 4, which is working in partnership with the town of Falmouth. As the design is developed, constraints with standards, right-of-way, and permitting have surfaced. While the Highway Division designs and implements many trail networks statewide, we follow design standards as they interact and as they possibly impact stakeholders. There needs to be a compromise at times. I don't want to get into the specifics at this time. I'm going to allow VHB to go through a summary of the phases in a moment. However, DOT recognizes when constraints become barriers to implementation, we need to we've got to find a way through. And it may not be, we're not going to build 100% consensus we never do on any project. And in as much as, and I'll reference the Cape Cod bridges, as much as everyone knows that those bridges need to be replaced, there's still details, there's still permitting, there's still right-of-way, there's still federal highway implementation standards that we're still working through. So although everyone realizes that those structures have reached their useful life and need to be replaced, we still have to kind of go through this process of identifying the best, most feasible alternative. And I only use that as an example because everyone in this room understands that. I mean, I could talk about other intersections and other projects throughout the Commonwealth, but where the bridges are so prevalent in everyone's mind, we're going to be back here next week. I think Monday is we're doing an open house, and my major projects team and our project team on the bridges will be down here, going through some of the status of where we are with things implemented. And again, I don't want to detract from this meeting, but I just want to say that when it makes sense and we get everyone's buy-in, there's still a process and it takes time. So we're here tonight really, and when we do go through everything, our goal here tonight is to get your feedback, to show you some of the things that we've come up with that we think can be implemented where MassDOT, or the Highway Division within MassDOT, has decision-making ability. And we don't have constraints with Joint Base Cape Cod and the Rail Division and the rail connections. So I'm going to stay away from that for right now, but our goal here is to find something that's implementable so that everyone in this room can realize a dream and a goal of riding on this rail trail in the near future and not continue to beat our heads against the wall for a number of years. So that's all I wanted to say at the outset. We're going to go through presentation, a little bit of history, and some of the specific items, and then we'll come back on some of our recommendations and then open it up to discussion and questions and answers. Okay? Thank you. Trish, I think you're up.
I'm up. I'm on deck. So can I have a point?
Yes.
So as Joe said, my name is Trish Domian. I'm not Trish Domian. I'm Trish Domian. I've been working on this project for a number of years. I think since 2019. The project itself is a very exciting project. It's a very interesting project, but it has been broken down into 4 phases. The whole project itself is about 6 miles. Phase 1 is from the canal to Monument Neck. Phase 2 is from Monument Neck to Valley Bars. Phase 3 is from Valley Bars to Scraggy Neck. And then Phase 4 is from Scraggy Neck to County Road. Oh, look at that. And this is the graphic that John doesn't like, obviously, that shows all the phases here. But this is just color-coded. This just actually shows that it does go from the canal and it will connect into the Shining Sea in Falmouth. So we wanted to give you a little bit of a project status. We're not just like stalemate or just banging our heads against the wall. We're moving. We're making progress on this project. It's slow and it's very methodical, we have to go through process, but, you know, for phase one, the advertising date is at, it's June 2025, correct?
June of '25, yeah?
Yeah, so we're nearing final design. There's a few more things that we have to take care of to get to final design. It says that we're at 75%. We have the 100%, what's called the 100% plans at our office we're waiting to file. Phase two is why we're here tonight. We want to take a look at different alternatives, different ways to get around some of the constraints that we identified back in 2019. And phase three, we're going to start initiating that. Phase three is very challenging. It's over a lot of water courses. Tonight's not the night to talk about that. So we'll talk about that in the future. And then phase four, we're at pre-25. We've been meeting with Falmouth. We've been meeting with the rail division on that. That's kind of tucked away right now until we get phase one done, and then we talk about phase two. So I want to give you a little bit of the design criteria. We don't just design bike paths. We don't put a bunch of asphalt on just, you know, a side line on the railroad or next to a roadway and call it a side path. There's design criteria that we have to follow. And I want to get into a little bit of the history from 2019 to now. So I'm not going to read all this stuff, but there's some key elements that you should know about. And I'm going to use my fancy thing that I haven't used since pre-COVID. And look at that, it still has batteries. So, you know, one of the things that we really had to keep in mind with the railroad is they really are very concerned about public safety. They want to make sure that there's no public trespass on their facility. They want to make sure that there's an offset from the railroad itself to whatever facility that is being designed or proposed for the shared use path. So what they wanted to do is put a chain link fence between the active railroad and the shared use path, put an 18-foot offset between the center line of track and the shared use path. So they want to make sure that there's a lot of separation between the two facilities. And then the 12 inches below, that's something that will come into play behind the depot at Worcester Ave. And, you know, they over and over again express their concern about trespass on the tracks. They know that people are trespassing now. They want to just make sure that people are safe. Whenever we go on the tracks, we have to have railroad safety training, and that safety training shows a lot of accidents, and it really does happen. So they're very concerned about that. FHWA, which is the Federal Highway Administration, and Mass DOT also has a lot of design criteria that we have to follow. What we have to do is really focus on healthy transportation, making sure shared use paths are universally accessible. Like I said, we're not just putting down pavement on the side of a road or the side of a railroad. We have to make sure that it has certain thresholds and parameters that we are designing to. Some of the key things that we have to talk about here is that there will be a 5-foot separation between the roadway and a shared use path, if that's an alternative that you guys would want to consider. And, you know, there could be, maybe or maybe not, some type of short barrier, so there would be a separation between the roadway itself and whatever the facility is that is designed next to the roadway for that alternative. So a little bit of history. I have to read this, and it's big enough I don't need my glasses. 2019, we went under contract. We went through a public procurement process and won the contract. Thank you very much, Town of Bourne, for developing concepts of phase one and phase two. We're talking about phase two tonight. The two alternatives that we considered, and Marissa's been with me every step of the way, was taking a look at what could be built in phase two. Remember, phase two is from Monument Neck down to Valley Bars. And what we did was we took a look at, okay, if we were within the right-of-way of the railroad, not knowing that we had the 18-foot offset, what could we put in there? So the shared use path and the offset from some of the constraints that were adjacent to the road, the right-of-way, was we had the offset from the railroad, the active rail, to the shared use path, and it went down to 10 feet, and then went out again, and then went down to 10 feet. And we presented that to the Mass DOT Rail Division. I'm just going to call it the Rail Division. And they were very concerned about that, and they told us that we had to hold the 18 feet. So when we did that, there was a lot of things that came up. There's a few red flags. There are some constraints, and I'm going to go through these tonight so that you understand what we went through back then. There are some constraints that we just really had to think about, and the reason why we looked at alternatives for this section of the trail. So in 2020, it was the hottest day of the year. I think it was 150 degrees out. We walked the railroad right of way. You were there. And we took a look at those constraints. So I'm just going to go through a few of them. Oops. Okay. So some of the things that we saw were that there were some right of way, keeping the 18-foot off. There was some impacts to the right-of-way into private property. And these locations were specifically behind the depot, and I have a graphic to show you. At Emmons Road, at Briarwood Bridge, we have pictures to show you that too, so that we can show you the process that we go through when we're designing these things. At the Back River, and then just south of Monument Neck Road. So there are things that we have to take a look at, existing features when we're designing rail trail, when we're designing anything, but rail trail projects is what we're talking about tonight. The other thing that we had to note was, some of the environmental features that are out there. This is a bunch of nerds, I think that's the big nerd, that's me, that are out at the Back River, and you can see it's a beautiful vista, it's gorgeous. It's a really, really lovely spot. But there's also salt marsh, and there's other things that we have to really be mindful of as we move forward with permitting. So, like I said, there was some constraints that we had to take a look at, and if I don't get blinded, I'm just going to show you this. So, this is a concept plan that we developed in 2020, or 2019.
2020.
This is Worcester Ave. This is Worcester Ave. Shore Road is down here. I'm just trying to get it oriented, right? So this is the active railroad. This is the depot building here. Oh, or I could use this fancy thing that I like to point. So these are all the residential houses, these boxes here, that are behind the depot, and you guys all know that, right? But if we put the shared use path, and this was a red flag, if we put the shared use path 18 foot off of the center line of track, which is one of the design criteria to meet safety for the railroad, the shared use path is 5 feet. It's very close to this one's actually on it, to the residential property. So one of the concerns that we did, and what we thought we could do is perhaps put a retaining wall in. But the houses that are there with the retaining wall right at their back, where they actually have some type of opening, at least they have some space between the railroad and the back door. This was one of the areas that we thought was very constrained. So that's one of the concerns that we had. This is Emmons Road. So you know that really narrow, short bridge. So if we put, again, 18 foot off, if we put the rail with trail, the shared use path next to the railroad here, it's about 20 feet off of that house. So that's something else that we just wanted to think about too. That's something that is just encroaching a little bit. It's within the right-of-way. It fits within the railroad right-of-way, but it's very close to that house. This is at the Back River. This is another one that I just wanted to show. So one of the things that we talked about on the hottest day ever site walk in 2020 was that this is the railroad here, right? This is the sideline, this and this. So the right-of-way kind of, actually it looks pretty straight. But when we spoke with the rail division and their consultants, it seemed like it would make sense to bring the shared use path closer to the bridge at the Back River. That's why, can you see it? It just goes down and over. And the reason for that is because there's existing abutments from the former railroad. There used to be something there. You guys could probably tell me what it was. And we can reuse that for the shared use path. So that's something that we talked about. These blue lines, some of them are salt marsh, so that's something that we have to be very mindful of. And then this is at Monument Neck. So the end of phase 1, which is going to be constructed in June of 2025, is the advertisement date. So this is Monument Neck, President's Road, and this is the very start of phase 2, the northern side. So this is the right-of-way, these red lines. And this, I believe, is an above-grade septic Is that right? The groundwater is probably pretty high at this location. So this was permitted and constructed. So that's something that we wouldn't be able to relocate. So that would be another location where we just couldn't make that 18-foot off. And again, remember, the 18-foot was a safety feature that the railroad really wanted. So we have come up with alternatives. I'm going to hand this over to Marissa in a minute. So what we did, because the land use, does everyone have to take a deep breath? I just gave you a wicked lot of information. Are you guys good? So the land use along this area and the constraints are a little bit different. So what we did, and it's 2 miles. So what we did was we broke it into 2 separate sections so that we could do a feasibility study and really kind of hone in on different alternatives for the 2 different sections. So we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about the southern section first, which is Valley Bars up to Worcester. And then we'll talk about Worcester up to Monument Neck after that. Just because it was easier to see different alternatives, but we're still, as John had mentioned, we're still trying to look at alternatives that could be implementable in a shorter time frame than relocating the rail line. So,
All right, my turn.
go ahead, ma'am.
All right. Thank you, Trish.
Oh,
So the first part that I'm going to go over is the southern part of the Phase 2 analysis. That's from Worcester Ave to Valley Bars. VHB was asked to evaluate 3 different alternatives. For the southern part, alternative 1 is a rail width trail on the west side of the railroad tracks.
Sorry.
Alternative 2 is a shared use path on Shore Road. And alternative 3 is a hybrid of alternatives 1 and 2. It'll be alternative 3 would be a rail width trail from Valley Bars to Monument Beach, where it would utilize an existing emergency vehicle crossing to transition the path to then be a shared use path on Shore Road to Worcester Ave. Oops, wrong way. So the next few slides are just going to be some zoomed out aerial images that show the different alignments of each alternative. You can see here at Valley Bars, alternative 1 and 3 are on the west side of the existing rail line, where alternative 2 travels east on the northern side of Valley Bars to Shore Road, where it then travels north on the west side of Shore Road. This is just a continuation of each alternative, but on this slide I'd just like to point out that that's the Emmons Road area, and for alternatives 1 and 3, we'd be proposing bridge structures for the path to go over Emmons Road. And then our last view here, you can see where alternative 3 transitions from the rail width trail on the west side of the tracks to the shared use path along Shore Road. And each of these alternatives end at the Worcester Ave intersection, where the northern part of the study picked up, and we'll go over that in a little bit. So now, just to go over some of the existing features that are along each of our alternatives. The image on your left is of the Briarwood Lane Bridge. It's an existing structure. We are looking at trying to fit the path in the space between the pier and the abutment, but that would have to be further evaluated to determine if there would be any structural impacts to the existing bridge. The picture on the right is of Emmons Road. You can see in the distance back there, that's the existing railroad bridge for the tracks that go over Emmons Road. This is the area that Trish was mentioning in the history, and in the corner, and is this how you get them? Yeah, that's how you get it. In the corner right here, that is the existing house that would be about 20 feet from the proposed bridges that would go over Emmons Road, 18 foot off of this existing structure. Continuing on, both these photos are taken at the existing depot area. You can see on the picture to your left how all of this existing screening and vegetation would have to be cleared away. And the picture on the right shows those residences that are really close to the right-of-way over there. And What did I say it was, right? So now just to show you what a typical section of alternative 1, which is the rail width trail on the west side of the railroad tracks, would look like. This section is looking north. You can see that we have the 10-foot shared use path with a shoulder on both sides, the offset from the existing track, and the chain link fence that separates the path from the track. This is also the same typical section that's being used on phase 1. All right. Now to go to Shore Road. So both these photos are Shore Road. The picture on your left is at the depot area. You can see the depot there. And this just shows that horizontal curve that is at Shore Road at this area. And the picture on the right is a section of Shore Road. And you can see on the right, there is an existing sidewalk in this section. There's not sidewalk on every section of Shore Road, which makes it not universally accessible when it's in these short spurt areas. Also in this area, in this picture, you can see the informal parking that is happening on Shore Road. That is not enforced, but it's with Shore Road is a state highway layout, so parking is technically not allowed. Continuing on Shore Road, this is close to the Emmons Road intersection with Shore Road. You can see that this existing house is a lot higher than Shore Road. There are a few retaining walls, and specifically this one at the back of the existing sidewalk over here. To avoid really major impacts to this drastic change in elevation, one thing that could be evaluated is shifting Shore Road a little further to the east. It appears that it's not actually centered in the state highway layout. So by shifting it to the east, we could fit in the shared use path without majorly impacting that existing residence. Also, wow, that got a reaction. Also, the image on the right is another area of Shore Road. It's at the Monument Beach area. In this one, I just wanted to point out and talk through how people seem to park informally on Shore Road near this because they want to go to the beach, right? Who doesn't want to go to the beach in the summer? But they're parking on Shore Road here and then trespassing over the tracks to get to the beach, which technically trespassing is not allowed.
What question?
Oh.
Referring to that second
At the end.
at the end?
Yeah.
What
Thank you.
slide number is this? Is it a slide number so we can say?
Slide 29.
Okay.
Thank you all. Now just to go on to talk about the area near Valley Bars. The image on the left is the end of Valley Bars. You can see the railroad bridge here in the distance. And there are some more informal parking areas on Valley Bars, which could be looked at to make these more formalized parking areas for any of the alternatives. And then on the right is Shore Road approaching Valley Bars, which you can see there are no sidewalks, no accommodations in this area. All right. You see there's a pattern to the slides now. This is a typical section for the shared use path alternative. This typical section is also looking north. You can see from the existing roadway, we have a 5-foot buffer. In this typical section, as an example, we are showing the small barrier when we have the 10-foot path with a 2-foot shoulder on the other side. Now, just to give you guys some examples and some visuals of shared use paths that were constructed. This on your left is Greeno Boulevard in Cambridge, and this on the right is Truman Parkway in Boston. So now for the hybrid alternative, I just wanted to show the existing emergency vehicle crossing that is there today. This connects Monument Beach to Shore Road, allowing emergency vehicles to get through when needed. And this is what we would suggest to utilize for the hybrid alternative.
Why wouldn't it be trespassing?
Slide 33, remember that for later.
Thank you for your understanding.
So we have slide 29 and slide 33 bookmarked. All right, so now that was the southern portion of the Phase 2 study. Now to move on to the northern part of the Phase 2 study, which goes from Worcester Ave to the Monument Neck Road, President's Road intersection. VHB was asked to evaluate 3 additional alternatives. What we're calling alternative 4 is a rail with trail on the west side of the tracks. Alternative 5 is a shared use path on Shore Road. And alternative 6 is a rail with trail on the east side of the existing tracks. Similar to the southern part, for the northern part, I'll show you some aerial images that show the different layouts for each of the alternatives. You can see at Worcester Ave, alternative 4 and alternative 6 are on the west side and east side of the tracks, where alternative 5 goes along Shore Road. Continuing on, this is how each alternative would continue to progress. On this, I'd just like to point out for alternative 4 and alternative 6, proposed bridge structures would be needed to span over the back river. Whereas for alternative 5, we propose to fit the shared use path on the existing Shore Road bridge that goes over the back river. And then lastly, you can see alternatives 4 and 6 continue along the rail line, where alternative 5 continues on Shore Road to Old Dam Road, where it will cross over Monument Neck Road, and each of these alternatives ends and meets up with Phase 1 of the project at the President's Road, Monument Neck Road intersection.
Go to slide number for that. 230.
37. All right. So now just to talk about some of the existing features that are within the northern part of the Phase 2 study. Image on your left is of that concrete foundation that Trish was mentioning near the Monument Neck Road, President's Road intersection. You can see it goes, as we showed in the history part, it goes right up on the layout line. The image on the right is at the back river. Beautiful view. And you can kind of see some of the salt marsh that we mentioned was in the area. Here we have Evergreen Hill Road. This is an example of a grade crossing that would be needed. And we chose this one in particular because I wanted to point out how the vegetation and the screening would need to be cleared to make sure there's adequate sight distance for the crossing. And here is what the typical section for alternative 4, which is the rail with trail on the west side, would look like. This is the same typical section as alternative 1 in the southern part, and the same typical section as Phase 1. So same looking north, we have a 10-foot wide shared use path, shoulders on both sides, the 18-foot offset from the center of the existing track with the chain link fence separating the path from the track. Now to talk about some more of the existing features for alternative 5, the shared use path on Shore Road. The image on your left is of Monument Road. It's looking towards the intersection of President's Road and Monument Neck Road, where there is the existing at-grade track crossing. You can see in this image some of the Monument Neck Road area isn't in the best of condition, which that could be repaired by installing a shared use path. And also, similar to the areas of Shore Road, Monument Neck Road does have a little sidewalk here, but it's not universally accessible. And the image on the right is of the Shore Road at Old Dam Road intersection. This is a very wide intersection. And on Old Dam Road is the Monument Neck Cemetery, which has a stone wall going around the outside of it. And at this corner here, the wall creates a pinch point for a proposed path. So we recommend that this area would need to be evaluated further to make sure we don't impact the cemetery, since it's a cultural and historical area. Next, we have Shore Road at the Back River Bridge. You can see here, we would propose to put the shared use path within the existing structure, and we would just have to do some additional analysis to make sure these modifications, see if there would have to be any modifications to the existing structure, because we'd be adding the shared use path. And then the image on the right is of Shore Road. There are, in the northern part from Worcester Ave to Monument Neck Road, a lot of driveway crossings to Shore Road. It appeared when we were looking at it, there were a lot more houses in that stretch, which is why we had so many more driveway crossings. And here we have the typical section. For alternative 5, the shared use path on Shore Road. You can see we have the 5-foot offset from the existing roadway. Example with the small barrier, the 10-foot path with the 2-foot shoulder. Now, for alternative 6, which is the railroad trail on the east side, just to talk about a couple of existing features that came up when we looked at this alternative. You can see the image on the left. There's a chain link fence right here that is right on the right-of-way line. And also in this image, you can see not far back is an existing building. And then the picture on the right is at the Monument Neck Road, President's Road intersection. And just to point out that there are, there's a lot of vegetation and everything, but at this intersection, there was not any foundation that we would run into. All right. So this is a typical section for alternative 6, the railroad trail on the east side. It's basically a mirror of the west side. This section is, if you were looking north, you can see we have the 18-foot offset from the center of the existing track, shoulders, and the 10-foot path with the chain link fence separating the path from the track.
Slide number?
45.
Thank you.
I've lost track of the slides now, so you guys will have to remind me.
It's in the top right.
No, I meant which slides we were bookmarking to go back to. All right. So now that we looked at all of these alternatives, we laid them out, kind of what did we do with that information? So VHB prepared a evaluation metrics for all of these impacts listed on the screen, and we kind of compared each alternative based on these impacts. So now, I'd like to turn it back to DOT to finish up.
Couple things we're going to open up to discussion, and I'm glad that people had comments. We're not trying to stifle any discussion. We just wanted to get through the whole thing, and then we'll go back to any of the slides that were asked and take some of that discussion point. When we initially started out, and appreciate VHB going through a little bit of the history and then the alternatives and some of the metrics that we were using to measure the effectiveness of the alternatives for the railroad trail on the east side of the tracks, on the west side of the tracks, or on Shore Road. Wanted to identify what our constraints were on each of those alternatives. One item that we didn't really discuss before now is Joint Base Cape Cod. And I just want to quickly go over a couple of items. I don't need to give the history of Joint Base. You guys all live with it. But it's an important military training location in the Northeast. it runs along the, between the Falmouth secondary line and then the Otis branch, provides access into Joint Base. And then that and ultimately connects Joint Base to what's called the Southeastern Mass Rail Line and the Strategic Rail Corridor Network, which is called STRACnet. Well, it's a military term, but it's for emergency preparedness for our military. And we talked about what some of our constraints were. And, STRACnet is a vital part of our national defense system. And it's not something that MassDOT has any real control over, and the town of Bourne doesn't, I participate in the military civilian community council meetings and present different projects and interact with them, but it's something that's outside of our purview, it's outside of really the town's purview, other than it happens to border and be part of, right? So, there's been discussion about, has it been used, when was it last used? I don't want to get into all the details of it. The issue is that it's not when it was last used, it's when it's next needs to be used, and it can't not be there. So there was discussion about removing the rail line and trying to put the rail, to go from an alternative that was rail to trail. So eliminate the rail and put the trail in that location. That became an obstacle. And I said at the beginning of our discussion about we can continue to fight that option, or options that deal with things that aren't under our control, but I was asked, in my role, to evaluate what is an option we can kind of pivot to, that we can have some success, that I said the people in this room can enjoy in the near future. Not saying that the rail line may not go away, but there is a user, there is an owner, and there's a need. It's just not needed every day. And as a result, we tend to think of it as it's not really needed because we don't ever see any trains on it, we never see anything doing this, and so it's not really needed. But it's something that's needed for the Commonwealth. I want to give one quick story, because I'm in charge of projects statewide. I have over, basically over 1,000 projects over a 5-year period. And we're dealing with all kinds of things. We deal with communities, we deal with private property owners, we deal with permitting, etc. So we have a project in the city of Pittsfield. Now, Pittsfield has nothing to do with Bourne, but I want to share something. We have a project along State Highway, which is Route 9, that runs by a facility in Pittsfield, which is the former General Electric facility, which I think about 30 years ago, we ran out of power. Can't go back to the slides. Where are we? So about 30 years ago, there was impact to groundwater and the property at the GE facility that caused the GE facility to close. They relocated several people, they bought up all the houses, and then the military went in and they took over that facility, and they have some form of work that they do there. So we had a shared use path that we were proposing along State Route 9 that was running adjacent to that facility. And we met with the local folks in Pittsfield, and it's a widened sidewalk over an existing widened sidewalk, but we were dealing with, the local folks, and they said, well, it doesn't look that, bad to us, but it still has to go to Washington, and they're gonna ultimately decide because we were getting closer to the facility. And they had protests, and they had other things when something was happening, etc. I made the recommendation to the chief engineer. I said, look, the risk is too great. We could come up with a great design and be able to do this, but it gets sent to Washington and they go, no, you can't come 2 inches closer to the facility, can't touch the fence, can't do this. So I just made the recommendation, can we put the shared use path and widen sidewalk on the opposite side of Route 9, get no closer to that facility? And it was a risk aversion decision. And that project is due to go out next year, but we lost 3 years kind of fighting it and going back and forth. And it's a simple reconstruction of Route 9 in Pittsfield and a sidewalk. But it was just, rather than beating our heads against the wall again, I said, I think we can do this, we can achieve all the same goals and do it this way without that impact. And I look at that a little bit similarly to our situation with Joint Base. And as I said, everyone in this room, you live with it every day, I don't. I deal with them on projects and other things. But it was our goal to try and find an alternative that could be implemented. Could be permitted, designed, implemented in a more reasonable timeframe. And that's the alternatives that we came here to discuss today. Last point I wanted to make, on the joint base stuff is that it's not debatable and open for discussion. It's just a fact that's been provided in MassDOT through joint base and the rail division. DOT recognized the constraints of the rail line and was asked to investigate alternatives that could be implemented without impacts and changes to the rail line. So that's what we did. I think we have some workable solutions. Not everything's done, it still needs some tweaking. We talked about the constraints on the north portion, phase 2 north, where we have a septic system that's been constructed. It's on private property, but it butts up right against the railroad, so we don't have the offset distance to be able to put in the shared use path on that side. But that was an area where we had general consensus from the rail division that we could work something there. And then also at Back River, same type of thing. We thought we had options that were achievable with the rail division and with their operator on that phase 2 north portion. So we just looked at, were there other alternatives? Because when I have to go to the State Transportation Board and say, is there another feasible alternative that does not impact StractNet, does not impact this, and I have to say, yes, there is an alternative, but this is what it's going to be, it doesn't generally start the process of, okay, we're going to abandon the rail line. So again, I came to the realization with the team and with with the chief engineer and the secretary can we do something different? So that's what we've come here to talk about. The other piece we call the southern section from Worcester Avenue to Valley Bars, we look at an option, that section of Shore Road is under state control. So there's some informal parking that DOT doesn't ever come in and say, hey, you can't park there. But we think that there's some alternatives there that the roadway could be reconstructed. We could put in, when I talk about a separated shared use path, I'm talking about a 10-foot wide path that would be walk and bike within Shore Road, which is a great amenity. I mean, and we're not trying to impact private property. We're trying to, and we'll work with the community on, as we said at the property that had the retaining wall, that the house was much higher, we could shift Shore Road over 20 feet, still stay within the state right-of-way, not touch the retaining wall, and still be able to build a widened path, a widened sidewalk along that stretch. So, our evaluation matrix, as Marissa talked about, these are some of the things that we identified as our constraints. Right-of-way, wetland impacts, salt marsh is a significant concern. We can't impact salt marsh. Anytime I've ever had a project that had a square foot of salt marsh, it was, you gotta find another way. So I would say that as much as the vistas at Back River and over by the lobster trap are great, we can do we gotta stay away from the salt marsh. Bridge construction, parking, utilities, railroad safety requirements, and we're gonna meet all those things. Do we have 2 closing?
We do.
Well,
Did you want to say something, Marissa? Did I misstate anything?
no, you're doing great. Thumbs up.
Always tell the client they're doing great, thank you. So I'm gonna let Joe just do our last wrap-up, 2 slides, which is essentially, I've kind of done it without any formal, you don't have to write down 48, 49. We know which ones they are. He got the power back to work, so we'll go back to whatever slide you want to look at. We want your feedback. We want to work in partnership with the community to make this an implementable trail. I have done trails over my career in all parts. I haven't been at DOT for my entire career. I had a sabbatical of 26 years where I was Trish's boss at VHB, and I did work on the Shining Sea back 12 years? 12 years ago, I think, when I was working on that. And then I've done other bike trails in, out in Pittsfield, where I talked about, there's the Asher-Wiltacook. I worked on the Newark Trail in Northampton, the Columbia Greenway in Westfield that goes down to Connecticut. We build bridges, we build trails, we'll find a way to get it done. I just don't want to fight the railroad and the military. They have more people. They have weapons. I don't want to do that. Go ahead.
Thank you, John. So that was a lot of context, and we'll try to get through the last 2 slides as quickly as possible to get into questions and discussions. But as John mentioned, the keywords are feasibility and implementability. I don't even know if that's a word, but
Implementable, let's say it's implementable.
implementable. So this slide shows the Phase 2 South section, and Alternative 2, which is the Shore Road Shared Use Path, is Mass DOT's recommended alternative. So a couple characteristics of this alternative, as Marissa already mentioned before, but I'll try to wrap it up, is this is under Mass DOT highway jurisdiction. This also will provide this corridor with a pedestrian and bicycle accommodation along Shore Road. This will, as John mentioned, kind of speed things up in terms of construction schedule. This will also upgrade our state highway layout, and as Marissa mentioned, at certain points along this corridor, we can look into potentially shifting the Shore Road to avoid any significant right-of-way impacts. So this is the Phase 2 North section and Mass DOT's recommended alternative for this section. We recommend either Alternative 4 or Alternative 6. Both are rail with trail. Alternative 4 is the trail west of the railroad, and Alternative 6 is trail width to the east of the rail. A lot of ale rhyming words here. So this will involve more significant coordination between Mass DOT and our rail division partners. This presents a existing condition where we try to avoid Shore Road at this section because of the kind of the dense neighborhood characteristics that Shore Road at this section contains. This includes avoiding Shore Road driveway crossings, which would increase potential pedestrian and bicycle conflicts with vehicular users, as well as historic impacts, as Marissa mentioned, the Monument Neck Road Cemetery and the stone wall. This, as I said, avoids right-of-way impacts as well, and this will also avoid impacts to the private parking on, this will impact private parking on Shore Road businesses. So I understand that was a lot, and we can go back to any of the slides that you guys want. But we'll now open it up to questions and discussions. I know. We'll get through it.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jared. We're going.
Yes.
Go first. Okay. I let people go first. I'm here to
We
listen to
we
people.
just typically like to allow elected officials to, get a little priority. At least they can ask the questions first, but,
They'll wait.
the
We
select
want to
board
hear
says
the
they'll wait,
people.
we'll wait here for the
They'll
people.
follow up at the end.
If for the ground rules, if you could just state your name, because the stenographer will have that.
Sure, Mike Chapman, Congressmanville Heating's office. Obviously, these are rail with trail alternatives, and you went into some of the reasons why, at this point, DOT is not considering pure rail trail alternatives. But there's a lot of work that's been put into it. DHB has done some great work, that's not free. So I'm wondering has there been a cost analysis of these rail with trail alternatives versus a pure rail trail alternative?
We have some feasible cost analysis, but as part of VHB's feasibility work, we haven't troubleshot all those because we didn't have our recommendations. Tonight was not to talk about cost so much, as to talk about feedback from the community on the options that we discussed, because they've been kind of moving in one direction, and this is a little bit of a pivot from that. So we're trying to get some feedback on options and considerations that we've just discussed, and we're still weighing our costs a little bit because there were modifications and alternatives, because we may have to do bridges, we may have to do adjacent to the rail line, and then it's at a very high level feasibility. We have to do survey and design to get some of that more.
So there is no feasibility report that's been finalized or completed?
It's been finalized and submitted to DOT, it's under our review. We felt it was sufficiently developed that we could come to the community and present, because we think that there are feasible alternatives, but we haven't assessed the full cost.
Thank you.
Paul Lambert, my brothers John and Neil, actually Neil's right there. Our family owns a summer house on Shore Road, it's been in the family since 1953. So we're right across the street from where this is going to take place. So I was asking about slide number 29.
There's a second to get back there.
Okay. So, question now, it looks like you're proposing alternative 2, which is shared use sidewalk bike trail for this section. Right?
Yes.
Okay. By the way, I think that's the best. Just listening from what you had to say, that sounds like.
Okay, thank you. Next one.
That was a statement. That was very clever, though. Now, my question to you is actually, they're two-parter. One is, if it's a shared path, is there still going to have to be a chain link fence along the pathway separating the train tracks from the path?
On the water side.
I don't believe so.
If we're not within the right of way, we're not going to touch we're not planning to install chain link fence within the rail right of way for the rail division.
A concern we had is if you go and, it doesn't sound like it would be necessary for this, but if you go and install, and I was going to ask how high, my initial focus, how high is that chain link fence going to be? Because if you've got a tall chain link fence going the whole length of Shore Road, you're essentially going to be creating a terrible eyesore on Shore Road, spoiling the view that we've all been singing the praises of and saying, what in the world, you know, what do we do that?
Chain link fence is really only proposed when we're in proximity to the rail division and the rail operator, or the business operator, is they're concerned about trespass, and they want a separation. If we're going to put walkers, riders, rollerbladers, etc., they need a separation because of public safety. On a shared use path on roadway, we're not envisioning having a chain link fence or anything like that.
Now,
we did look at, we have shown some options that have a barrier if we're proximate to the roadway, and we just show a barrier that could be, a timber guardrail, could be, we're considering that. Also, some of the other examples we showed with some landscaping, some street trees through there. Our considerations, we're taking feedback to say, we're not proposing chain link fence between the roadway and the trail or at the back of the shared use path at this time.
now my second part of that question is, what comment was made about how people access the beach. Because there are two gateways by which people access the beach in that stretch that have been used for all living memory.
Probably before the tracks existed.
Probably, and I know that there are people that in their deeds have beach rights written into that say they can go in to the beach through that way. If we go and shut that off, that might be problematic. I'm not sure how you would deal with that, but I'm not sure that you can close off that access to the beach.
The emergency access that's there now, we would not close off. I think there's a gate there now. I'm not sure how much it's enforced or how often it's locked. The consideration, as I stated with the chain link fence question, is that if we were to introduce a trail within the railroad right-of-way, if we could meet the offset, the rail division and the operator are looking for a physical separation between the trail and the rail line. That's if we're in that location, and that's something that you know, for them, it's a safety, it's a trespass, I understand the comment that you raised about beach rights and access on deeds, et cetera, is something that gets a little bit more granular. We haven't done any of that research yet, but that's where our constraints are. If we're inside the rail right of way, they're saying the only way we're gonna let you do this is if we have a physical separation of some type, so that's been chain link fence. If we're on Shore Road and we're putting in a separated shared use path, that's within DOT's purview, and, you know, it wouldn't change that access to the beach area, et cetera, from the rail side. We would, kind of like the unenforced parking that's on Shore Road.
Like right there.
Yeah.
Susan Barricini, just a point of information, the people that park on that spot of the road just don't want to pay the beach sticker fee, so they park there and they walk over to the beach that way.
So if I had a kiosk, I could make a little dough. And, and Marissa discussed a couple of the locations where there was some informal parking. If we were to, where we're building rail trails and, statewide, it's short-sighted if we don't look at trailhead locations. So we don't always have them paved. They can be, different type of treatments, so that way we're not creating more impervious area and things like that. So we are doing it in other locations. But it's short-sighted if we don't at least consider that not everyone is going to ride their bike from 20 miles away. Some may pull up, take their bikes out of their vehicle at a location, and we want to make sure that if there's a need for a trailhead, that it's appropriately designed, constructed, and is safe, and then, people can offload, onload, etc. Those are getting into some of the details, but I appreciate that comment. Thank you.
John Woodley, you have proposed 6 different alternatives. You have one slide that shows how we would put all of those alternatives together.
Well, we don't have one slide that shows that. We've said on the southern portion.
Just for phase 2.
Right.
Okay.
Phase 2 southern, which is from Worcester Avenue to Valley Bars, we're recommending the separated shared use path on Shore Road.
Okay.
From Worcester Avenue to Monument Neck Road,
It's a
we're staying rail with trail,
Either
but
side.
east and west, we're still working with the rail division on that piece. But we're saying, we feel that, and I think Marissa described this, a separated shared use path on that northern piece of Shore Road is a bit problematic. It's a little bit denser with residential properties, so there's a lot more driveways. May not be the best experience, and there might be impacts. And we had at least some, a little bit of a blessing with the rail division on the rail with trail alternatives. We need to work through those 2 constraints, Back River, and then that septic system at almost the northern terminus. That we thought we had some consensus with the railroad, and we're going to continue to pursue that. So that's why we're saying east-west, the best way we can do it without impacting some of those constraints.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
So let me ask you this. So as we're looking at 6 alternatives here, and you've already said the one that most greatly affects me is phase 2, because that's my brother. What are the factors that will determine which options are ultimately the selected? Is it public buy-in? What are the ultimate factors that will determine which options were selected?
Well, we're recommending that phase 2 north is a separated shared use path.
Right.
And then the phase 2 north portion, we're working on a rail with trail option, and et cetera. Those are our 2 options that we're here to just go on.
Yeah.
I guess on the northern piece, it's kind of 2. It's rail with trail is the option.
Right.
We're trying to work east side or west side, whichever is least impactful.
And I'm more concerned with the south.
Yeah, I understand.
section,
So then the
so
south,
what are
we're
the
making that
big
recommendation
factors?
because we control that right of way.
Yeah.
We don't have to fight with the railroad, the operators. We're coming to the town saying, we think this is the way to go, but we want your feedback, and we're gonna try to build some consensus if unless there's strong opposition that you can't do it,
Right.
that's the alternative that we would
I
recommend.
like 2 and 3 because we're not putting up this 8-foot chain link fence, but I'm just my own.
Did I answer or did I confuse?
I'm more confused. So between 2 and 3, let's say we took option 1 off the table. Let's say that's,
Okay.
what would help decide, what are the mitigating factors that'll say, this is the reason we're going with this is preferred because it is X, Y, or Z? What would help to push us in any particular direction?
The support of the community to go with our recommendation.
That's the answer. That's what I was looking for. Is that,
I have 350 other communities with all kinds of projects, so I don't want to say that Bourne's not a preferred community.
Right.
I'm just trying to come get some feedback, see if there's a consensus that the town is supportive of doing, of these alternatives. Prior, the last 6 months or so, let's say, over the previous 6 months, there was a very strong desire and push for eliminating the rail and trying to put the trail on it. And I'm not opposed to it. I just said that my lifetime, some people's lifetime, I just feel that that's not a feasible alternative that we can implement in a short duration.
you had me at no chain link fence, so.
So I'm saying we want to hear from the community to say, absolutely, this won't work, or I can live with this, I'd like to see the details. Because we don't have all the details tonight, it's a feasibility, it's a very high level assessment. If we feel that we have feedback and consensus, not full, but we have some general support, we'll work with the town to go to the next level of design. It's gonna, because the trail wasn't proposed on Shore Road, so we need an existing condition survey of Shore Road. And we have to kind of go back to the railroad on the northern piece to work through that, and then we'll partner with the town to go to 25% design, identify what our specific constraints or impacts might be, so that way we can, more clearly and definitively describe it to the folks in this room that, hey, there's some sliver takings, but this is how we're going to mitigate it. Those details haven't been worked out. So we're at a very high level, but if we feel, that you guys haven't chased us out of here yet, that it's a workable, we can make it with some, there's compromise again. We'll continue to recommend and work with the town boards and the town administrator center to advance this.
All the way in the back.
Ann Kitchell, I live on Old Dam Road. You're really good. I wish you wouldn't give up on the rail to trail. But you guys, these are a lot of alternatives. I can't think of another one that's this rail and trail. Keep them all. The one thing that I would love to see, and maybe you've done this in your analysis, all of this is going through really sensitive watersheds, impaired waters. I haven't seen or heard one thing about actually improving those conditions. This is a big construction project. You're proposing additional impervious cover. I didn't hear anything about maybe trying to make some of the existing culverts bigger. If you could just talk a little bit about your analysis with sea level rise impacts and changes. I mean, just past Monk's Park, when you stand there and you look out where the railroad goes across that marsh, last year's king tide, I stood there and the water was like, I mean, I wasn't on the tracks because I don't trespass, right? But I mean, it looked like it was like a foot below the actual track. And
And you said I'm good?
I don't know. I'm not in the military, but I would think that is not. I mean, a path that floods on occasional high tides is manageable. Railroad track that does that is not. So I know you guys have talked about this. What is the lifespan of that infrastructure that we're trying to protect forever? I don't want to expend all these resources to do all this complicated stuff when we all know the simplest thing is just go to rail to trail. But if you have to keep it, keep it for the military, I would like to see that it's worth it for this trade-off, because I don't think those tracks are in a good spot. I'm sure when they were built, they were like, there's no arsenic leaking out of them or any of that stuff. Like what, I don't know, did you guys look at any of that?
Let me state a couple quick things. As part of the phase one portion, which runs from the canal to Monument Neck, that's the first phase one. We had to do a
Right.
coastal flood analysis of that section recently for the rail division, such that that phase one rail with trail was not exacerbating
Right.
the flowage to the railroad. Because we would be within the railroad right-of-way, and they would allow us to be in there, but, so we've just completed that analysis, the rail division is reviewing that right now, and their consultant, and we think we're gonna be favorable and be fine. We have not, on any of these other phases, conducted that analysis at this time, because we're really still at, I don't like to say that we've worked, you know, that the town and VHB have worked on this so long, we're still at kind of like square one. We're not at square one, but where we were trying to, where the town was, you know, and the bike committee, et cetera, were trying to look at that rail to trail, and we've hit a roadblock there. So my job was to come back and say, do we have something? We've come back with a feasible alternative that can work. When we drill down into the design piece, then we'll look at infrastructure in, not specifically the rail, because it's not our purview, but we would look at, is the existing shore road, and if we're going to put a separated shared use path on it, what's that gonna do to flowage patterns? What's it gonna do to the existing drainage? Is it gonna impact any cross flow, et cetera? Are there impacts to sensitive environmental constraints and cultural resources? Those are things that we would do at a design level. I don't like to say that we've been working on this, and that's, I guess I could say, is that the reason that we're still feasible is because we don't have a viable option that we have control over. And that's why DOT has tried to step in, work with the town, and then hire VHB to do a specific task. Can we implement something different, or are we gonna continue to try and go down this, in all due respect to Edward McClap, a rail to trail alternative? My job is to find a way to implement something, and I would recommend staying away from rail to trail, not precluding it any time in the future if the rail were to go away, but I'm looking at an option for the people in this room to use a bike path or a shared use path in Bourne to connect to the Shining Sea Bikeway and the canal. That's what I'm looking to implement. And the easiest, most, I'd say the easiest path forward is with the alternatives that we presented tonight. This gentleman, we have a few others. This gentleman is happy.
Hi, Paul Lafano. So I'd be for the rail coming up and having a trail. I live over in Gray Gables. We just went through town meeting. Basically, we were told that was going to be the only section that was going to have trail. Have the rail. Now we're being told something different.
I'm sorry, I can't comment on town meeting. I wasn't here.
I guess we have the selectmen here at the town meeting, which I think is out of order because you didn't post this, so I think you're right.
It is a posted meeting and it was called to
Is
order.
it as selectmen?
Incorrect. Yes.
As a selectman?
Yes.
All right.
Don't go down that road.
The part that you don't talk about is now, what do you do on the next section? So we're getting.
Can I ask, just to clarify, I'll let you finish.
Yeah.
When you say the next section, you mean phase 3?
Phase 3. So,
Okay.
so, we're doing this piecemeal. So, you're talking about, in your lifetime, we're not gonna get to the base or whatever, but in your lifetime, are we gonna get across the river there? We're gonna get across the marshes here. We're just talking about, this woman was talking about the marshes. That's a small section over the back river. Over the other river, the Tonto River, is much bigger. So what happens with that phase and how long, are we gonna wait? And where are people gonna go? Even if you build it, that you're able to get over that section, now you're on Shore Drive, and then you gotta veer down Monks, or Valley Road, to Monks Park, and then get back onto the to the railway and then go across. Are people really gonna do that once you have that roadway going across Shore Road?
Difficult question to answer, and I want to take some more questions, but DOT stepped in to try and help get off this section that's stuck. Phase 3 has never advanced beyond, the thumb, this looks like a great idea. It's never advanced beyond that, by the town, by the Cape Cod Commission, or by DOT. However, with the focus on coming up with an alternative that is implementable for phase 2, my office has hired VHB to look at phase 3, because I'm telling you, it's never been looked at other than from 10,000 feet. Oh, this looks like a great location. So I need to understand what the constraints are for phase 3 to see if it is another implementable project. So we've engaged VHB to do that, and they're just about ready to get started on that piece. And then, phase 4 has been, and I can't comment specifically, maybe Trish or Marlene could comment, but phase 4, it was implemented in phases because of cost, because of permitting, etc. But no one had ever looked at phase 3. And, I don't want to take a bow or anything like that, but I looked at the same thing and said, well, what happens when we do this? And we've never looked at it. I said, so we got to at least do something more than's been done. Look at the cultural resources, look at the wetlands and environmental constraints, and look at the existing features to see if a phase 3 is possible, is implementable. And we've engaged VHB to do that, but they're just getting started for us. So that's our piece on phase 3. Gentleman in the back standing, and then come back.
Make a comment first and a question. I'm in favor of ripping up the rails. It's so simple and significantly cheaper. And I don't know if every base in the country has a train track going to it or not. And just wondering if that would be, I don't want to discard that. The second question is, have you looked at how many road and driveway crossings there are going from the canal down to North Falmouth? Because that's a concern, is the safety of crossing them. The Shining Sea Bike Path has like maybe 5 or 6 crossings. This sounds like it's going to have, 100. Have you tallied up the different routes and how many road and driveway crossings there would be?
I don't know if we've actually tallied these.
We looked at it from a high level, but we did not have existing survey of Shore Road yet, so we hadn't put an exact number to it.
Because one of the concerns is, are you going to get stuck at a point in the southern end where you just can't get from here to there?
We need to have, anytime we're going to use federal funds for a project of this type, we have to have what's called independent utility. It needs to go from a public way or a destination to another destination. It has to be, a connectivity issue. So as the project has been broken, the overall project has been broken into 4 phases. Each phase had what's called independent utility. You were coming from the canal trail or path, the Army Corps access road, from that location to Monument Neck, and is it the park that's there? Or so that was phase 1. Phase 2 we've talked about tonight, and we've talked about phase 3, at least at a very high level that we're engaging to see what our options are. And we haven't drilled down into those details because we haven't done in existing conditions, because it would be very costly, and we didn't feel that we had a workable option. So now, if we walk out of here tonight and we're going to post the slide deck and the talking points onto our websites, that way people can go online and comment electronically, as well as those that are here tonight. If we have an alternative, we feel we have consensus, that we'll work with the town to initiate that next phase, which is going to be existing condition survey of that phase 2 segment, while the phase 3 feasibility is embarked.
What if you get, like, for instance, down by Kingman Marine, there's a track that goes over the road. It's very hilly. It's really
I
hard
don't
to
know what
navigate.
Kingman Marine is.
It's in Catawba, but it's going to be very difficult. And I'm just wondering if you get stuck, you can't get it any further because
No, it's
geographical.
I mean, and that's the point of doing, you know, again, we started at a very high level, we want to see if there's consensus to go to a more granular level, a more on-the-ground type of, you know, what are our constraints, and is there a design that can mitigate those constraints? Can we shift, can we cut, can we fill, you know, what can we do to make things work? And I don't know specifically that particular location, but, you know, we would work that next phase of, you know, from feasibility into design and identify the constraints, costs, you know, we put in boardwalks when we're adjacent and too close to salt marsh, but try to prevent shadowing and shading, because that can impact the salt marsh. But, you know, we could have a structural, a bridge or a structure of some type that could support the trail. So we haven't got to that level yet, but those are things that we would consider. Yes, sir.
My name is Ken Shetland, and I want to compliment both the Highway Division and VHD on the work you've done. I think this is very creative, and I appreciate you looking at alternatives. I did want to point out that, in fact, it is not a foregone conclusion that the track needs to remain, and in fact, there are many people working on getting the necessary permissions to pull the track. Obviously, you pull the track, you have a trail laid out, you've got all the groundwork done, and we've got $20 million in hand, thanks to the CCRTA, to build this path right away. So earlier you said something about this being the faster avenue, but I assume that if we get the permission to pull up that track, in fact, building rail to trail is a much faster route and much less expensive than if we go with these creative alternatives.
Clearly safer.
I'm not sure I heard a question.
My question is, do you agree that this... I'm sorry, I thought it
And maybe I apologize, I did.
No, I'm going to your comment about this being the fastest alternative to get to the end result. And I'm simply asking, if we get permission to pull up the track, isn't it much faster and much cheaper for us to do rail to trail? Much cheaper and much faster than this, since we don't even know whether phase 3 is possible. That's all I'm asking.
I don't know if I could say that pulling up the track and putting the trail on that right-of-way is faster, because I don't have a path forward that is in MassDOT's control to eliminate and take up that track.
I totally understand it's not MassDOT's decision.
So I'm only trying to rule and offer an option or an alternative where DOT has skin in the game.
I do appreciate that, and I understand that's your constraint. I'm just saying.
No, I just don't want to comment and say I can't deal in supposition. If this happens, if that happened, could this be faster? That's a lot of supposition. I don't control the money. I don't control the right of way, and I certainly, I went over very briefly the StracNet issues that I've received from Joint Base, from the Rail Division, and from the Surface Transportation Board about the track.
Yeah.
So those are constraints, they're facts, they're undebatable, so I'm taking that as kind of gospel, and I'm saying I have an option that could be implementable.
Exactly.
It doesn't have those constraints. That's all I'm working on.
I greatly appreciate that.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm not disagreeing.
Okay, I just want to point out
but if we want to continue to fight that alternative and pursue that alternative, DOT steps out. The town has already invested a significant amount of money in getting to this point. DOT did not ask the town to have VHB do this work. DOT stepped in because I was asked by the Secretary and Lieutenant Governor, can you find a way to do this without the rail?
Right, John, I understand that.
No, I'm just saying.
I appreciate you guys are doing exactly what you've been asked to do.
I can't control that 20 million, I can't control CCT, RTA. It's outside my purview.
I understand, and I'm not arguing with that point at all. I'm simply saying, as you did when you talk about the future potential use of that rail line, that is a very questionable, value that has to be weighed against the public benefit in having this trail in our lifetimes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I understand it's not in my purview and it's not in yours, but I just wanted to remind everyone that we are not precluded yet from the option of pulling up that track. And if we did, we would make all of your lives much easier. You'd have a trail in 2 years.
Sorry. So you mentioned sort of like a no-go to go on Salt Marsh, but in Mattapoisett, there's a new beautiful bike path. It's on like a boardwalk that goes
Yeah.
about a mile.
DOT did that.
So it's doable, right? Between, like, say, from right here to Shore Road across Pocasset River Marsh, that could be potentially done, right? Rather than go on the road.
Yeah, I said if there was salt marsh, I said that a few minutes ago, that if there was salt marsh and a boardwalk option would work, depending on shading and shadowing of the salt marsh, that might be an alternative through some of those areas that we've identified as constrained.
Thanks.
Last thing I want to say is, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, we're kind of at, we're kind of still at that feasibility 10,000 foot level. And we have, HB, on the hottest day of the year, Trish, walked the corridor and said, these are our constraints, and are there ways that we can design around those constraints is our goal. And we will do that. I was involved very closely with Mattapoisett on those two bridges. We ended up with some trouble during construction, and I was asked to evaluate that. There was some cupping in the decking, and we made some redesign changes. And now I was just there probably 2 or 3 weeks ago on it. Checking it's been accepted by the town, and it's tremendously successful.
Yes, beautiful.
And I would like nothing more than for that to happen in Bourne.
Thanks. Oh, and this railway belongs to the people of Massachusetts, not to the Defense Department. So we should have, the people who live here should be able to say what's the best use of this property.
Railroads are kind of funny. They go back so many years that they have inherent approvals, and I can't remember all the different details. It's not my area of expertise, but generally railroads, because they predate some things where, and access and control and surface transportation and movements of goods and services, they have ownership, they have rights that predate a lot of, some of the highway division stuff, and we just, it's just not something that we can fight on. There was a gentleman right there.
Yeah, Tom Barnes. I think if I was going back and forth, I think you've made a really good argument tonight for the rail to trail. So, but a couple points. Number one, we just had a town meeting and we voted to go ahead with phase 1. But it was with very clear promise from the speakers, the advocates for the trail, that the only part of the trail that would have a rail was phase 1, and that the other 3 phases absolutely would not have any rail. So that was part of the discussion. And the other part that word that's been passed out is that the military is not wedded to that track in that location, that they'd be amenable to a track being moved down MacArthur Boulevard. So that doesn't have to be an obstacle.
Could be an alternative for MassDOT to look at.
Yeah. But again, you're talking about 4 phases with a rail, basically. And we were told that the only rail required was the spur up at phase 1, which the trains would need to do a turnaround.
Right.
That was it.
Sorry, I can't comment on town meetings.
Well, but that you're looking for the sense of the community and what
No, I do. I want, and I understand we're not going to all agree. We're just looking for your feedback on it. I'm sorry that I wasn't part of that. So the way it was presented, it was my understanding, and looking at the town meeting warrant articles, on the acquisition. I didn't drill into the details, but it was to authorize the town to take the property necessary to build phase 1. That's a very overarching, I didn't read the details, but that was something that I recall, I read as part of the articles. That was about that. So I didn't get to the specifics. Yes, sir, right there.
Just a quick question. I believe I prefer the rail to trail, but of everything you've presented here, because I understand you don't have anything to do with that, I like the space to Shore Road alternative you're showing us here. My question is, when you get between the old depot and Cumberland Farms and you have that really sketchy intersection on Shore Road where it zigzags and nobody really knows which way to go, especially the tourists, is there a way to take this thing and get additional benefits, like put the utilities underground and fix that corner? Are there ways to get better, additional enhancements?
Additional benefits and enhancements at that location. Tricia, if I could ask, or Melissa, we had looked at some realignment and tweaking at the intersection.
Yeah, so we did some realignment of that intersection to get a shared path in front of that depot area. That was definitely a pinch point in the area. To your other points about the underground utilities, everything we did.
All I asked was that you answered that question, that you looked at an alternative that the intersection. All the other issues, underground and utilities, those are benefits that DOT does not typically, it's not needed for the project. It's part of an enhancement to the community in that area. So it's not generally fundable, by DOT and federal highway for doing that stuff unless it's, unless it's necessary, because in an area that gets knocked down all the time or something, from whatever event. So I would say that the designers looked at alternatives to improve on the intersection to fit the shared use path through there, but we did not explore enhancements such as underground and utilities, et cetera. We would look at how could we mitigate any parking that we may impact as part of, fixing that intersection and more defining the movements through there. Drainage would all be part of that, but we didn't look at specifically for any enhancements to bury utilities.
That's what I was going to say.
Well, that's a DOT call.
But if you're tearing up and moving the road, like to the left in this picture here, you have to move those poles anyway, so why not put them?
Yeah, but they're privately owned poles and utilities, and they dictate a lot of that stuff and what we reimburse for. We've got a couple in the back. We'll get you, sir, because you haven't asked a question, and we'll come back to you soon.
Just had a question on the monument net north, I guess, piece, the rail width trail. You mentioned there was a septic system near the intersection. The wholesale processing plant is also right up against it. I think that right away is extra narrow, so like 50 feet versus 75.
Okay.
So that's, I'm sure that's all been taken into account at some place along the way. But my other comments, I hope it is, but the other comment that I have is that you mentioned the question you were asked is the alternative without impacting the rail to do this, which I assume that this is connecting Shining Sea to the canal, right? How do you answer that question without knowing whether phase 3 is even feasible without impacting the rail?
Let's say that the goal from when we started out with the 4 phases is to make that connection, and it's part of a long-range plan. The feasibility and cost of that phase 3 has just never been looked at
I
to this point.
understand that it's never been looked at.
So that's why we're looking at it, so we can see if there is a feasible alternative.
Right, but until you look at it, my comment is, until you look at it, I don't think you can answer the fundamental question of, is it feasible to get from Shining Sea to the canal?
Right, okay, I'm saying that the bigger, the bigger picture is to do that connection, and we're assessing that feasibility. Each of the phases needed to have what I described, independent utilities, so they have to be able to connect from a destination, from a point to a destination, so it's being implemented in pieces. But I agree that, at this time, I don't know if phase 3 is feasible, but it is something where,
So you won't be able to answer the question until you've done the feasibility study, is what I'm
we
saying.
can't specifically say that it can be done until we assess what the impacts might be. So you had your hand up, and then I'll go back to Dave.
Okay, so I have a couple of things. So just to piggyback on this with the with the tracks. If we find out that the tracks can't be moved, I like all the work on the alternative ideas, I like moving that part of Shore Road. Those are really cool things because for all these years, we have bought on phase 3. So my husband and I have walked it for years. And we've looked at whose houses are as close as ours or further away. So if we have to accept that the tracks aren't going anywhere, I really like some of the ideas that you proposed, so those show some real promise. A concern I have is in the Worcester Road area, we're working right now in the town to build a new fire station, and we're faced with 100-year flood plan constraints for choosing property. One of those is in that Worcester, that fire department that's there, as well as the one, again, phase 3, Pocasset. So the concern, when the young lady from Old Dam Road spoke so eloquently about the tide at Monk's Cove and that bridge level, wouldn't it just be better to move the tracks on the north side of 28 and take those out of the 20-year floodplain as well? And if all we end up losing in a 100-year floodplain, is a shared use path, it'd be better than having the railroad tracks be submerged. And then also, what you may have observed while you were here on the hottest day is how fabulous this area is, and nobody wants a chain link fence anywhere along this path. So if you can do anything to get the tracks out of here, then nobody along that trail line would need a chain link fence because there would be access routes to it. The struggle, I think, the biggest struggle I think that nobody's talked about is parking on point to point.
Right.
Terminus to terminus.
Right, I talked briefly about trailheads and making sure that we can accommodate them.
Okay,
Thank you. David, you have a question? I'll get to you next, sir. Get to you next.
I'm David McPherson. I've been the chairman of the Town Advisory Committee working on this project since 2018. It's been a long haul. I want to thank you for your thoughtful presentation because you've been able to demonstrate and show things I kind of know just from traveling to different bike paths when I'm out and about in the country and the state. And you've really demonstrated the amazing things you can do when faced with impediments. So thank you for that. I want to also state that since somebody raised an issue about public posting, in addition to the selectmen, the Bike Path Committee did post this meeting for ourselves because I do think there's a quorum, so we're in full compliance with the law. Regarding statements at town meeting, I want to address, since I made a lot of statements at town meeting. The town's position, as voted on by the select board in March of 2023 after a vote by our committee, is the town has been pursuing a rail to trail project. And it's never been stated unequivocally that it's going to happen. That was not a promise made at town meeting. What we said was we are pursuing that and we continue to pursue it. The question is at what point, how long do we wait for that to happen? This proposal to remove the tracks has been before the governor's office for a year and a half. Could there be action next week? Possibly. I don't know. But I think the question that the town has to confront is how long do we want to wait? People say, well, what if we can only, get, why build phase 2 if we might pull up the tracks? Well, I happen to believe personally, eventually those tracks are going away. But again, my own private opinion, not the committee's opinion, is it could be a very, very long time. I think phase 2 as you presented, as well as phase 1, are an improvement over public safety that exists right now. I run and bike a lot in this area, and if you just build phases 1 and 2 as outlined, it's a vast improvement over public safety. And the town has to confront the issue, do we take this, even if it's a temporary measure? I think, maybe we do. Ultimately, I think it's the select board that has to make the decision on which way does the town want to go. I think our committee will probably be addressing the issue at our upcoming meetings, and we may make a recommendation. So I would love to see rail to trail all the way to town. The question is, how do we get there? How long does it take? And other alternatives in the meantime? And I think we do have to give serious consideration to this, because I'd like to see something on the ground while I'm still alive, and hopefully I'm still a young man. Last thing I want to ask about is the requirement for the fence and the 18-foot setback the rail division insists upon. Is that a federal design requirement, or is that their desire? Because I think, particularly if the tracks are not removed, that puts a major impediment in certain sections. As you know, the right-of-way is not consistent with the entire distance to Falmouth. It varies in different sections. Some sections, the 18-foot setback is not a problem. Other places it is. I frankly think their insistence on a, 8-foot fence and an 18-foot setback is unreasonable. Again, I'm kind of a bike path geek. I've been to other bike paths around the country where I've seen rail right next to trail. There's no 18-foot setback. One I'm thinking of, in the city of Charlotte, North Carolina, they have a light rail that goes through downtown. I've ridden a bike along that rail trail, and it ain't 18 feet away, and there's no 8-foot chain link fence. So my question is, is that their desire, or is there a strict federal requirement? Because I think there needs to be a little compromise there on the rail division's part. So is that a requirement?
Can I answer that?
Chris, you can answer that. You deal with it more than I have.
Thank you very much, that's a really good question.
Could you stand?
Give me a minute. So the question is the 18-foot offset a federal mandate, or is it a state desire, essentially, right? So all of the different rail types, and you are a bike path geek?
Yeah.
Touche. It depends on the type of railroad. They have different
Yeah, they have
classifications,
classes.
and also the different uses of the railroad itself. So the rail division and the operator, which is Mass Coastal, operates construction debris and a lot of trash on this rail line. And they feel it's the most safe using 18-foot off for this railroad and the class of this railroad itself. So light rail will have a smaller offset. And if you actually look at the FRA, the Federal Rail Administration, they have guidance on that. And you can see the different classifications with what the offsets are for that. So it's a really good question. They also have used that offset on the Cape Cod Rail Trail Phase 2, I want to say, where it's an 18-foot off between the path at Peter Homer Park and also the rail. And there is a chain link fence. And no one likes the chain link. I'm with you 1,000%, but it is a safety issue, and they really are concerned with the trust.
Yeah, I just want to make one more comment, and I'll sit down. In regards to the fence and the setback issue, and I don't know if there's anyone here from the rail division, but people have to put this project in a larger context. The Vision 88 plan that was talked about is a proposal to create a continuous path from Woods Hole through Bourne, along the canal, Sandwich, Barnstable, Yarmouth, going all the way to Provincetown. And there are multiple towns that are working on projects like this in every single town. What I don't want to see happen is that Bourne becomes the missing link. And if it does, because of unreasonable requirements by the rail division, you think there's a lot of pressure now to get rid of those railroad tracks. It's only going to increase as the other sections on the Cape are done. So if there's anyone from the rail division here,
There's no one here from the rail division. This is a highway division meeting?
I believe the rail...
So that was a rhetorical question?
Yeah, I understand. You can send him my regards, but...
I will.
But I also believe that the rail division, like the highway division, are part of the State Department of Transportation, of which there's a Secretary of Transportation who I assume has oversight of both divisions.
She asked me to come down here specifically for this purpose.
So anyways, I think the rail division needs to start
Coming down here.
being a little more flexible, or the pressure that they're feeling now is going to continue to increase.
Sir, that's standing right there.
Thank you.
You can identify yourself?
John Carroll.
John Carroll.
This village. Thank you, David. There's some high-level concepts here that we're floating around the room, so high that we can't even talk about them for some reason. One being safety and the other military. There's nobody higher up that knows more about our safety than we do
and we deal with it every day. There's the person that walked here tonight, there's the person that biked here tonight, there's those of us that drove here tonight, and we're this close from each other. And we do this all the time. And I didn't hear any issues tonight. Day and night we do this, and none of us would suggest there should be a fence between my sidewalk and my road. And none of us would suggest that there needs to be a fence between East Bourne and West Bourne. That's just ridiculous to talk about. So, it is something that keeps getting introduced here, and we're the ones that are paying for phase 1 through phase however, and all the visions of each phase. It's costing us a lot of time to talk about something that we've already dealt with. My mom taught me how to cross the street, and I know how to cross that track, okay? The other little thing that keeps coming up is the military. We can't talk about the military. The military needs fuel. The fuel goes down the road. The military might need a quick response sometime. Coast Guard gets a call, they use the runway. Off they go. I don't think the military has explained to us, and apparently not to you, this thing that we can't talk about. But we talk about it, we see it, and we know what's real here. We, who have trespassed all the way to the end of the Buddhist spur, have seen trees higher than this on the track, and when we finally got close to Otis, the tracks are gone. They don't even go there anymore. So there's some reality here that is real, and we need to talk about it. I'm not asking for a response because it's so high that you can't answer it, right? But that's what I'm hearing here. Thank you.
I appreciate the comment. Thank you. Gentleman in the back?
Yeah, we attended, my wife and I attended a meeting in Mashpee 8 months ago, when they were talking about the section, and they had the gentleman from Cabosa, F2 Railroad, whatever, Coastal Railroad. David Vieira, the rep, was there at the time, and I thought he had done research on the military side of it, and that they don't need the rail coming right into the base. They need access to the, whatever the term is for that main corridor that's running up and down the East Coast. And I thought he had implied, and I don't want to put words in his mouth because I might have got it wrong, that as long as they could get over the bridge by road and access the rail going up and down, that was their needed rail service for military base, for military purposes. I mean, if, God forbid, the Bourne Bridge screws up, the railroad bridge, there's no getting off anyway, so they'd be going over the bridges anyway on the road. And I think you're right, fuel, everything else comes in by roadway over.
Right.
It might be something to pursue, looking into,
No,
just to check that box off, that maybe that isn't the...
Vieira and Ms. Moran and others, and I know there are opinions, and I can't comment on all of them, but, because I don't know, I'm just reporting the information that was provided to me, on those constraints. Mr. Kahira.
I just want to thank you for the presentation. It was quite informative, and I know from all of you watching you over the years how hard you work on these matters and what the charge is that you've been handed. Just a few observations in regard to what has been said here tonight. I'm in favor of ripping up the tracks. And for 10 years I was the Deputy Secretary of Rail in Massachusetts. So I'm quite familiar with most of the lines, Falmouth Secondary, Hyannis Main Line. I'm familiar with all that. I just feel that for many of the reasons that articulated, particularly by Ken, there's no municipal waste being used on that line now. There's no municipal waste. The two issues that you raise as impediments, one being the military, this gentleman just indicated that David Vieira has looked into it ad nauseum. Congressman Keating, who's been a prominent leader in our efforts to move those tracks, did a comprehensive analysis of the Stracknick piece and indicated that it's not an issue there. And he has the work, I don't know if put Mike on the spot, but I know that he did some, and he's on the appropriate congressional committee that deals with the Department of Defense, so I don't think that's gonna be an issue, that's number one. And there is a process, and you were correct in stating that taking on railroads is sometimes a challenge, but there is a process, the STV. And sometimes it takes a year or two to do that. But in order to get this thing done, if you rip the tracks up, we can get it done. We have the federal funds obligated and directed towards this effort. We could get it done in the next 5 years. Whereas you haven't talked about Katana, and that hasn't been your job. You haven't talked about Phase 3 or any of these other matters, but they're incredibly costly. And I'm not as well versed as some in the room, but it's 60 years before it gets done, the land takings and costs. I've seen these issues go on for decades, and so I know you're doing a great job, and you've been a real gentleman, and your team has been very articulate and straightforward, but I really think, and I know that Governor Healy and the Lieutenant Governor are seriously considering, to the point where I'm putting my friend Gus Bickford, who's a key player at NASDOT, who works with the Lieutenant Governor. I know she sent him down here to see how things go tonight. So they are listening and they want to help. So I'm confident with the leadership of Dave and Ken and others in the room that it'll get done. So I just hope that, you know, they, through Gus's wisdom, if they do those things.
Yeah, thank you very much for your comment. I don't do public hearings and public info meetings anymore for DOT. That's back in my history. I'm the deputy chief engineer. They come to me for approval to have the meetings and the hearings, but this was very important to the Lieutenant Governor and the Secretary that they asked me to partner with our project manager, Joe Yu, and VHB, and find a way to get some feedback and support to move the project forward. I don't disagree with the comments that you stated, and I don't disagree with the opinions of others. You know, this would do this. My role is to say, I can do with my team something in a shorter period of time if I don't have to deal with the military, the railroad, etc. And that's my goal, is just to get your feedback, and say that, you know, DOT is recommending this as the most feasible, prudent alternative to move forward. If there's a decision, if the pendulum swings back on the rail removal, etc., you know, that's a great thing for the town. I'm just trying to work within the constraints that we've been given. Yes, sir.
I respect everything you've said tonight, and I echo all the compliments that have been put forth about the work that's gone into this. I just hope that you'll go home tonight realizing a couple of things. This town of Bourne, historically, has been chewed up. In the 1930s, we lost almost a third of our land area to the military reservation. Before that, in 1914, our town was bisected by the ditch. About that same time, this railroad cut right through the most valuable real estate in the town of Bourne, some of the most valuable real estate on all of Cape Cod. I hope you take away from this session tonight. I want to say that I was a little bit disappointed at your personal introduction. I know all the constraints that got you here and the direction that you've been given. But we keep talking about two alternatives: rail to trail or rail with trail. But what we've heard is there's really a third alternative, which may be trail with relocation of rail. And to me, that's the most practical long-term solution. If you look at the economic development potential of the town of Bourne, that could be a result of getting rid of that track in its current location
we would turn this town of Bourne from being on the lower rungs of the ladder of prominence on Cape Cod to being a leader on the ladder of prominence on Cape Cod. What you could do, and I don't mean you personally, but what could result for this town could be immense if we could get rid of the tracks in their current location. And I wonder how the military would react if it was proposed to relocate the rail over onto the other side of MacArthur Boulevard. I wonder if they would really be still standing up saying, yeah, it's really important that we have it. I wonder if that might call their hand to really make an objective rationalization of that question. And I just want to leave you with that this town and the folks in this town feel that that's the right solution, is to get rid of the tracks in their current location. And although you're doing the right thing for what you've been asked to do, and we support the alternatives you're proposing, the bigger question really is not being addressed. And it's such a much bigger question. And you can't give up on that. None of us should give up on that question. Thank you.
I have a couple things to say, but one, I think there's two more hands, and then there's some things that we have to talk about the military, because the military has said they're fine with relocating the track. They just want a commitment from MassDOT that the track will be relocated, so they can say, go ahead and pick it, rip it up. They do want military readiness, but they want a commitment for the relocation of that track. And that is the alternative. And these alternatives are not real alternatives. If you go to slide 29, I think it is, where you're showing Shore Road and you're relocating Shore Road. So you're going to relocate Shore Road up. Have you done that? Have you done it on a GIS and said, okay, when we move Shore Road over 20 feet or to the edge of the right-of-way and we eliminate that parking, and then we're going to cross the railroad, and it's not going to be trespassing now because it's going to be for the bike path. And what's going to happen to the emergency access for the emergency vehicles at that crossing? Are we now going to have all vehicles being able to cross there? When that crossing went in, and the town of Bourne paid for the crossing and the lights, at town meeting, there was supposed to be a pedestrian crossing included, which is why we did upgrading rights. So there's a lot. Opening up that access, that emergency access to Monument Beach, would mean that any boat could go and use the Monument Beach Marina. And now, only the boats that can fit under the railway are allowed to use that boat ramp, because Mass Coastal will not allow us to have access to boats crossing there. So the town of Bourne has paid a lot for the use of that rail that is minor. We have one private entity that's using it for their private use, and it is disrupting the town of Bourne. It's impacting our property values. It's making us look at alternatives. How are you going to do the pinch point? Is the pinch point at Monument Beach Center, is that in alternative too? And it's a pinch point, which means you don't have an answer to it, so it's not a real alternative. The best alternative for this town is to go to rail to trail, have no chain link fence, have no division of our town, the water side and the non-water side, by a chain link fence that's going to divide us, and it's an environmental justice issue. There is no alternative. They can ask you to come and say, oh, this is an alternative, and we looked at it, but we haven't really designed it. We don't know if it's feasible. The Bike Path Committee, when they looked at Phase 4 and what's going to happen at Katomin Village, they said, it's not possible. It's not possible. We're going to cut down 150-year-old spruce trees. There's no way around it. You're going to have to do this. You're going to have to do that. That's what the Bike Path Committee said. We have to pivot rail to trail. If we're going to have a viable bike path alternative, we're going to have to pick up these tracks. Because the rest of this, I mean, you can talk about it, is it an alternative? Yeah, it's an alternative. Is it a good alternative? Is it a viable alternative? Is it a beneficial alternative? No. There's always alternatives, but are they good alternatives? No. In this case, there's one good, viable alternative for the town of Bourne, and that is rail to trail.
Just agree with everything MJ just said, and just to add on as well.
Can't hear you.
Ed Markey, who has said that a vision without funding is an illusion, and it's a dream, and it's not, how can you even look at the feasibility and compare when, in the meantime, we've got a clock ticking, and we've got money that we can spend. I love trains, I commuted on trains my whole life, and I hate burning money. And to wait for feasibility to come around, then it's going to be the holidays, and then time's up, and we're not going to have a choice. So it seems like a lot of wasted time, and I agree, we need to look at taking those railroad tracks out. Chain link fence is detrimental, and we haven't even talked about wildlife crossings. How many people have white-tailed deer running down to the beach and running down to the woods from their houses across all these roads? Turtles, everything. I've stopped on the side of the road to pick up box turtles. They're not going to like those fences. And border road tracks. Gene is there, that's on the select board. Thank you.
Thank you. Your question?
Amy Herden from the Bourne Enterprise. I just wanted to ask you, sir, in the blue vest, your name, if you're willing.
Elmer Clegg.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
This person was before me.
Okay. You were just being courteous and letting him take.
No, I did for myself.
No, I know, he waited. Either way, why don't you go first?
I didn't know Hilda said I'm right over here. This is exhausting for me with all this information. And I really want to go back to what you were saying and what the madam back here was saying is the conservation aspect of this whole rail trail. And if you go to look, slide 50, I'll show you what I'm talking about is what you're looking for as information here is that. Now, if you go out the door right here and get on the tracks and look, you'll see that exact picture, but that's not this, but it's the exact same configuration. That's at another point on the rail. But I've lived here, and maybe every 5-6 years, I don't know if it's you or not, have done repairs on the rails. Now, it's been every year, the last 3 years, that the rocks have washed away, that the ties have to be replaced, and the creosote or the tar leaks into the Pocasset River, and it's horrible. Because I use the river every single day. So going to the conservation part of this, I think is the easiest way to get rid of those rails. And right now, actually, somebody goes down there and takes some pictures and sends it to the appropriate people, then, you know, something's going to happen, I think. I hope.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
So I have a question, it's a jurisdictional question, and I have a comment/suggestion.
John,
Excuse me, my name is John York, I'm a resident of the town of Bourne. People know me because I ride my bike everywhere. With respect to the hottest day of the year, I've been out there on many different hottest days of the year. I'd much rather be on a 12-foot wide piece of pavement away from the road on the hottest day of the year than on a shared use path along the side of the road. I can tell you I ride that road on the hottest day of the year. I don't mind hot weather, I actually really like it, because I'm also out there on the coldest day of the year. And so, as I understand, you can't spend any federal funds in Massachusetts District 5 unless you clear the sidewalks that you own and control of snow in the winter. That's the law as I understand it. I know that Mass DOT is delinquent on that. They have been for many years. I know they've been into talks with Federal Highway about that. When we've asked at different presentations Mass DOT has done here,
not in this building, but at Town Hall. The answer is come back, yes, we're working on that. And on specific projects where they were building shared use paths in our town, they were asked by us, who's gonna clear the snow? And they said, we will. When they built them, and the snow came and no one was out there to clear it. And the next snowstorm, our town DOT was clearing those shared use paths. So I think Mass DOT obviously said, yes, we're gonna clear the snow because they have to get the federal funding. But they didn't. So back to the jurisdictional question. You said that Shore Road is a state highway?
It's under state ownership, yes. I don't have the date and all that information with me tonight, but.
So the entire length of Shore Road?
I don't think the entire length. I apologize. I will get back through the town what the exact limits are, but I don't have that with me
So the
tonight.
entire length that you are talking about in this proposal?
It's our belief, yes.
It's your belief. Okay, so I received from our town engineer a plan yesterday that showed, I was specifically looking for the road layout at Pinch Point Five. And on that plan, it says, state layout discontinued 1955 or something like that, with a note right there on it.
No, I'm gonna have our right-of-way bureau look that up.
And so along that jurisdictional question, I think your whole plan hinges on that being a state-controlled road, is that correct?
No, it does not.
It does not?
What hinges on that plan is that it could be a portion of that road could be under town jurisdiction as well as under DOT jurisdiction. The distinction I was trying to make is that I do not need railroad approval. We would need partnership with the town if there's a portion of Shore Road that is town-owned, but it was our belief, and it might be discontinued, but it was our belief that it was under state control.
I only read those words that I said.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I don't even know what discontinued.
I'm not here to debate it, because I'm gonna look it up and make sure that we report back.
It was surprising to me, and first of all, I want to thank you for coming here, as everyone else has, and it's rare that we get Mass DOT come talk to us directly, and we really appreciate you coming here and the consultants coming here. It's, I wouldn't be able to sit here and tell you I think you're not doing your job climbing sidewalks if you didn't show up here to talk to us. So I very much appreciate you're here. So along those lines, so that was my question, was jurisdictional. Part of that question was also, who's the project proponent? As I understand, the project proponent is the town, is that correct?
The project proponent for the Bourne Rail Trail has been the town, yes.
For phase 2, which has a project number.
Yep.
Who is the project proponent?
The town is still the project
Great,
proponent.
okay, there were some questions about who makes the decisions. It's our project. We can say we're not going forward with it, as I understand. We're the town, we're the proponents, correct? Okay, that was just,
Could I clarify, and then I'll let you continue? We were at kind of like a stuck point, and it was unfair to ask the town to continue to invest resources to answer some of the questions that had been raised. Not only for phase 2, but I've talked about briefly phase 3, and also the coastal zone flowage that came from the rail division for phase 1. So DOT assisted the town by funding this feasibility for phase 2, funding the coastal zone flowage requirement on phase 1, and we're embarking on a feasibility for phase 3. The town has been the proponent, a great partner, but it was getting to the point, and I appreciate the select board's comment, is that the town was investing significant resources. And it was what we considered, can we solve this, can we help, because we thought that some of the direction was being onerous and costly. So we stepped in, offered to do additional work. I spoke with the town before, I spoke with the town administrator before we did the work and said, we'd like to do this to try and help assess the feasibility other than what has been pursued, and that's what we did. But I mean, the proponent, the town is still the proponent. They opened the project number through DOT. et cetera, et cetera. It's just that the cost was continuing to mount, and it was stuck. And I didn't want, you know, the team and the town to continue to spin their wheels, not have a decision. So DOT reached out and said, we'd like to fund this piece, to get through the issues that have been recently raised.
Great, so thank you. So those are my questions. You answered them very well. Again, I also want to thank the consultants and Mass DOT for being the consultants so we don't have to. And the Federal State Office. It's the EOEJ, the Executive Office of Environmental Justice. So my suggestion is that you contact the State Environmental Office, the State Office of Environmental Justice. So what you are proposing is to build a bike path alongside a railway with a fence between them. So the people on one side get a beautiful bike path, protected from the railway, extremely safe. The people on the other side get a totally unprotected railway with nothing between them and the railroad track, and a fence behind it. So, and one of your slides that you put up, it said something about safety issues, and the top one said, bike path on west side of rail, as a given. Now, I don't know how that decision was made, but I'm gonna guess that the people making that decision didn't consider the environmental justice implications of that. I do not believe you can spend federal funds on this project as envisioned because of the environmental justice issues. So what you're saying is that...
So you're saying that the installing, constructing the trail opposite is an environmental justice violation?
Yes, so let me finish.
So, no, I wanted to clarify, because I wanted, and you continue, I just wanted to clarify, that's what you were.
That's what I'm saying, my suggestion is that you run this past the EOEJ and get their opinion on it. So, what you're saying is that half of our town gets a bike path, and the other half gets an unprotected rail line with a fence behind it. Now let's look at our town and which half you chose. So this bike path divides the waterfront, the very most frontier of waterfront property, from the rest of the town. And who lives on that property? Who gets the bike path? With access wherever they want and no fence between them and it. So you're building what is estimated to be about $80 million, I believe, if you built out the whole bike path, because of the cost of doing rail and trail. And that's for an elite community that lives along the waterfront. And you're fencing off the lower income portion of our town from any access to that path, unless they travel a half mile, in some cases a mile, in the wrong direction from where they want to go to get on that path. And how are they going to do it? They're going to do it the way they do it right now. They're going to walk down to the railroad tracks, and since there's a fence behind it, they're going to walk on the railroad tracks for a mile, breaking the law, trespassing, to get to that place where there's already a roadway where they can get through onto the bike path or pedestrian path. At that point, they're just going to go right across the tracks and on down to where they want to go on the waterfront. And so think about the environmental justice. The whole reason we have environmental justice law and environmental justice standards is because major projects were often cited without proper regard for the disadvantaged community. But when it's beneficial, we want putting the benefits towards the community that's already advantaged, which is exactly what this project is going to do. Not only that, it's going to encourage, because environmental justice looked at communities where people were marginalized. What does marginalized mean? Just conditioning someone that the proper way to behave is to trespass, even though they know there's no trespassing signs, and they read in the newspaper that you're not supposed to do this. How am I going to get to the other side? I'm going to get there by trespassing. I'm going to trespass. It's going to happen. And so what you're saying is the marginalized communities, you guys go trespass, break the law. If we want, occasionally we'll enforce it and charge you some fines. it would be pennies to the people living on the other side of the tracks, but it's going to really impact them in their wallets. And these fines have been assessed in the town of Wareham, where people cross the tracks all the time to launch their kayaks. All of a sudden, enforcement, people got fined $200 a piece for walking across the tracks and putting their kayaks in. So what you're saying is, we're going to divide the town, and we're going to encourage the people on the low-income side of town to trespass and walk along the tracks, which everyone says is unsafe. You're going to put them at risk so that they can access that bike path that the people on the wealthy side of town have complete access to, and it further enhances their property values. I don't think that passes muster. And I'm asking you to run that past the state EOEJ to tell them what if they think that's an appropriate use of public monies. Thank you.
Do we have any more comments or discussion?
Thank you.
Thank you.
After 8, I think they want to go home at some point. I want to cut anyone off. Just cast it by